So, overcoming. What are your obstacles in life? What things that you feel that you have to overcome? Many would say you have to overcome the difficulties that others present to you. Somebody stands in the way and you have to overcome them. So there you are working away and your boss comes along and tells you, no, you don't do it like that. You should be doing it like this. And you have to overcome your boss and overcome your feelings and overcome the situation and actually get on with the work at hand. So obstacles in life. But this is different. If you read through the first 3 chapters of Revelation, I'm not going to ask you to do it now because I do need to carry on. You will find that overcoming in those chapters has more to do with overcoming ourselves and our sinful nature than it does have to do with overcoming various obstacles and bits and pieces that you have in the world. And I will bring out various themes. One of them would be your pride, overcoming our pride. And it's possible to be prideful in church. God forbid. You can be prideful about how good you are. You can be prideful about your status in the position in church. You can be prideful about, I help with the teas and coffees once a month, do you know? You can be prideful about how many people look up to you. You can be prideful about standing on a platform and preaching on Revelation. You can be prideful in church, and you can become so obsessed with doing the right thing and appearing to be the right person and portraying the right image of the church person that holds their head at the consecrated angle as the pastor preaches. Those of you that were now doing that now go, straight. You can be so prideful that you forget your first love. And one of the messages to the churches is on this very theme, how actually it has become about the process and you have lost the person in the process, and it is about the person. And so these messages that are coming to these various churches are reminding that we must overcome certain issues in our lives that are all to do with our control, saving ourselves, looking after ourselves, or even not really caring very much. Apathy is in there, cowardice is in there, sin and self-indulgence is in there, idolatry is in there, and I'm going to pick up on that theme for the moment. Going back to John's time, people worshipped various gods. There would have been the gods of fortune, and there would have been the gods of health, and there would have been the gods of youth, and there would have been the gods of luck. Now, clearly we don't worship that sort of thing here anymore. I mean, none of us worship at the god of luck, right? But the lottery is worshipping at the god of luck, where you invest of your time, which earned your money, and you spend it on the god of luck that maybe they will bless you. And this idea of worshipping and idolatry carries through into a modern theme, and we don't often realize we do it. Some of us will worship at the god of youth every time we try and buy a new cosmetic, and maybe the wrinkles will go away this time. I've got some bad news for you. The chances are the wrinkles won't go away, no matter how much you spend on that cream. So, idolatry. See, if you go to heaven, have you heard of that old parable, the Chinese one where it talks about the chopsticks? Have you heard this one? There's an old parable. This isn't the picture of heaven, but this is an old parable. That it goes a bit like this. There was a man that was taken up, and he was shown heaven and hell. And he went into the room called heaven, and all these people had these 2-meter-long chopsticks, and they were healthy, and there was all this food all over the table, and they were fit and healthy and well-fed and everything else. And the man said, "This is heaven." And he's like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." Then he was taken into hell, and there was a room with people with 2-meter-long chopsticks and a whole thing of food, and everybody was thin. And he was like, "Well, how does that work? It's exactly the same room, and yet one's hell and one's heaven." And the man that was showing him around said, "Aha," because there's always an aha, and a man showing people around going, "Ooh," and it's a bit like Yoda. And he says, "Well, in heaven, everybody uses the chopsticks, but you can't feed yourself with 2-meter-long chopsticks, so you feed the others. And in hell, everybody uses the 2-meter-long chopsticks and is trying to feed themselves." And it has this idea that carries with it. Now, this isn't heaven, but has this idea that heaven is for the selfless, those that have overcome the selfishness. And that hell is for the selfish. It is those that just wanted to indulge themselves. I'm God, I'm going to feed myself. all idolatry is worshipping gods that have been created, and so therefore all idolatry is selfish because we are creating our own gods that we may worship at their feet, rather than acknowledging the God and worship at his feet. And so in all of this, overcoming has to do with placing God or Christ as Lord of your life. He is God, not me. So, in Revelation, it talks about overcoming the self, overcoming the world. And the second part of that, therefore, is recognizing who is the source of the overcoming, which is the Christ, the Jesus, the God of this world. And therefore, in worshipping him, you overcome the world. In placing him as Lord of your life, you overcome these things. He is my Lord. He is my example. I will follow him wherever he may go. And it has this imagery attached to it. And so therefore, those that follow Christ are saved. Why? Because he is God, and he is the only one that can enable you to overcome yourself. Some of you may say, but I can overcome myself. So you can overcome your ability to rely on your own power by your own power. Contradiction. Let me maybe say that again. You, by your own power, can overcome your ability to overcome your own power. It doesn't seem to make sense because you cannot save yourself. Because then you would be your own savior. I'm strong enough to do this, and the root of sin is the reliance on the self of I'm strong enough to do this by myself, thank you very much. Which is why you cannot make yourself good, because you do it by selfish reasons. If you want to earn your way to heaven, then it's you doing what you want and you can do to get what you want out of life, and that's a selfish reason to go to heaven, which is why the idea that you earn your way to heaven doesn't work. I won't dwell too much on that, because I'll have lost some of you, and have really about 15 minutes later to bring you back. So, let me give you a slightly different picture. You come to my house, you go by my rules. I go to your house, I go by your rules. If I walk into your house and you say, no, don't worry, you don't have to take your shoes off, you can just walk on the carpets, that's fine then, I won't take my shoes off and I'll just walk on the carpets. However, some of you, take your shoes off. Did you know how much I paid for this carpet? Okay, I'll take my shoes off. And take your shoes off and you walk in, and that's fine because it's your rules. You know, if you and your house, you have dessert first before dinner, then fine, we'll eat dessert first before we have dinner. Why? Because it's your house, it's your rules. You want to get to heaven, it's God's house, it's his rules. So a nice easy picture for you to work with is that this is the way that God set it up. And so for those of you that don't want the philosophical wranglings and to go down this line of 300 lines of thought before we get to the conclusion that it's his house, it's his rules, it's his house, it's his rules, and it simplifies the way that you think about it. Heaven belongs to God. He makes the rules about how you get there. And if you don't like the idea of being in God's house because you don't like the idea of God's rules, then that's fine, you don't have to go there. And that actually gives you an idea of how we segue into Judgment Day and the way that works. Who likes the idea of Judgment Day? Do you know, if you took a Gallup poll of all the people in our country, you'd find about 80% of the people in our country believe in heaven and believe they're going. About 80%. Which is interesting, because not that many people believe in God in our country, apparently. Go figure. So about 80% of people believe that there's a heaven out there somewhere, and they believe that they are going. And if you ask people, if you say something like, well, you know, God decides, they don't like that idea very much because they say, well, I'm a good person, I've probably done enough to get there. I would have thought that I'd been good enough. I would have thought that I dwelled in kind of the good group for long enough to actually belong in the good group in heaven. You know, I'm not a bad person. I haven't done too many bad things. And so they get a bit upset about this idea that God selects. In fact, they get upset with the idea that actually one person might go to hell. Who likes that idea? And so they ask this question, why would God make a world where people go to hell? Why would God make it so that if you're bad, you go to hell? I mean, what kind of a tyrant God is that? And so they come up with all these kind of questions that come up. And they would rather be the ones that choose who goes. And here's the crux, you see. Heaven and hell. Right? People don't like the idea of hell, because they don't like the idea that anybody would go there. However, you wouldn't want child molesters and murderers to carry on what they're doing in heaven. It would be pretty awful to get a house in heaven and kind of just decorate it all up and then somebody comes and robs your TV. That wouldn't be heaven, that's here, right? And so we can't have that sort of thing going on in heaven. And so there would have to be some separation, but it would have to be somebody that was wise, somebody that was good, that would decide who to go to heaven or not. In fact, it would have to be somebody that's perfect. But then we get round to this idea that it might be Christ doing that, and some people in this world wouldn't want that to happen. So there's an issue that goes on with heaven, and that it's, if you talk about it to your friends, they don't like the idea of anybody going to hell. But if you press them on, well, that means everybody's going to heaven and you would end up with child molesters and everybody else in heaven, then they don't like the idea of that, but they wouldn't want God to be the one that chooses. They want somebody else that makes the selections down the line. And here's the difficulty. What is therefore good? Who chooses what is good? And you end up with this thing called relativism, which is, if it's everybody's different opinions on what good is, then we're not quite sure where we are. All looking forward to the Olympics? Okay. Can you imagine a 400-meter race, right, where somebody's kind of getting on the blocks, ready to go, you know? That's old-fashioned. Now they bend down, but I don't want to do that just in case I tear something. On the blocks, ready to go, right? Now, imagine for a moment that you're the person that's about to run the 400 meters, and you've got a whole group of people you're racing, right? But we've decided to treat this race just like we treat right and wrong in our world. Everybody's got an opinion on it. Right? You're about to get off the blocks, and suddenly somebody's blocks start moving forwards. And they're now further ahead, and they haven't started yet. And your blocks are starting to move back. And so you're going to have farther to run now. And as you start running, right, another bang goes, and somebody else starts, and somebody else went first because the bang went earlier. And you're thinking, well, why is there how do I... And so you're trying to run really hard and everything else. You're looking at the finish line, and now your lane... the finish line is moving further away, and somebody else's finish line is moving closer. And you're thinking, how do we know who's winning? How do we know what pace I'm running at? How do we know what time I'm running at? How do I judge how good I'm doing compared to everybody else when the markers keep moving? And it's got this idea is if the standards are different for everybody, then you can't have a definition of time. You can't have a definition of what is a good race to run. And there can't be a winner because everything is changing. Ironically, this is the way that the world sees good at this point in time in our country. And so therefore, when we talk about right and wrong and heaven and hell, the judgment of what good is can change from moment to moment, point to point, difference to difference. And this is why it is difficult as a Christian to stand up for a standard of good. Because the minute you stand up for a standard of good, it means other people are accountable to that standard because they are running their race at a different speed. And there is a line, and there is a start point and an end point, and this is the way the race is run. And some people don't like their idea. They want to cheat and move the thing closer. Yeah, we want to change the bar. But it's not them that makes the rules because they're not the ones that make the house. So, that is a little bit about relativism.